Good morning. My name is Ellie Hassama, and over the past year and a half, I've worked with Zasha DeCastri to organize Unsung Stories. I joined the faculty of Columbia's Department of Music in 2006 after a 6-year stint directing the Institute for Studies in American Music at Brooklyn College's Conservatory of Music. I was pleased to learn yesterday that both Judy Klein and Joyce Solomon Mormon also worked at Brooklyn College, which has a distinguished history in computer music. At Columbia, I teach in the music theory and historical musicology areas and work primarily in 20th and 20th century music, with a focus on music by women, Black and Asian American musicians and composers, including Jerry Allen, Julius Eastman, John Jang, Francis Wong, and DJ Cotton Candy, and on issues of diversity, equity, and social justice in music and the academy. While an undergraduate at the U of Chicago, I told Shulamit Ron that I wanted to be a composer. I've always conveyed to students what she said to me, which was, if you want to compose, you should respect that feeling. And so I studied composition with Brian Fairneyho, who was a visiting professor at Chicago, and kept taking composition and orchestration classes later in New York. I share this story because I left composition, partly because no teacher ever clicked for me after my studies in Chicago. One teacher dismissed my question about the experience of women composers. And so I work with joy on other people's music, OPM, and have devoted my career to shining a light on those whose music moves me and who did not get the attention they should be getting in the concert hall or in conservatories and music departments. These musicians and composers include Ruth Crawford and Julius Eastman. I've happily worked with a number of composers here at Columbia, including Zasha, both as a student and a colleague, DMA's Courtney Bryan, here on the call, Bill Doherty, Kate Soper, and Taishan Sori, and current students including Nina Fukuoka and Jessie Cox. Jessie is gracefully managing this session behind the scenes, with our thanks. 4 years ago, in response to a new grant opportunity at Columbia titled The Collaborative to Advance Equity Through Research, I conceived of a multi-year project called For the Daughters of Harlem, Working in Sound, an initiative that brings young women of color from public high schools to campus for a free workshop at the CMC. Our work was influenced by sociologist Tia Denora's book, Music in Everyday Life, which explores the notion that music is a technology with the power to shape the self. A dozen young women spent time at the CMC working in sound art and sound recording. With co-PIs Zasha, Mia Masaoka, and Lucy Wagnerova at the initial workshop, we held our first meeting in April 2018. After its success, we expanded the project to a second, longer workshop in October 2018. The project received coverage in an article published in the Journal of Blacks in Higher Education and a video article in Columbia News that will screen now. It's about 6 minutes.
I'm really looking to sampling beats and being able to curate music with those beats.
Take it away, take it away.
It was a new experience too. I've never been in a studio before.
Yes, yes, Rachel.
Through the workshop, the mentors taught us how to produce music on the computer and how to work with sounds.
It felt very inviting that they actually acknowledge women of color.
It's so important to ensure that the industry that I'm in reflects the world that I live in. So for me, it was very important to take part in the Daughters of Harlem project.
The project is called For the Daughters of Harlem, Working in Sound, and it invites young women of color from New York City's public schools to come to Columbia and discuss, make, learn how to record and produce their own music under the guidance of workshop leaders.
So the students are in the studio working with professional equipment, working with professionals, and it's collaborative with each other. So we have small groups of students instead of one-on-ones. They rotate through the 4 instructors throughout the day, so everyone gets to work with everyone else. And in terms of the second part, it's a humanities-based workshop in which we want to bring some ideas from scholarship to these young women in a very real-life way. So we were inspired by a book called Music in Everyday Life by Tia Denora, who's a sociologist. So in that book, she talks about the uses of music and music as a technology, music as a way that very deeply intersects with one's idea of who they are and who they can be.
Music to me is basically like how people express how they're feeling and like their emotions, but here is more about like sounds of like everywhere. So like music is like in your daily life and you don't like really know it. So that's how I'm like thinking about it differently here. That's what they've taught me.
These instructors are amazing. I'm really interested in the music that they made and the projects that they made as well. I feel that's very creative, and the aspects that they have is very intriguing, and it's also making me question what I'm trying to do with those musical aspects. So taking their ideas is pretty neat.
Right? So that's kind of what happens when sampling is like brought into a musical session.
I kind of feel like because Columbia is in Harlem, I think that's why this program is so necessary, to be able to reach out to the people of this community, and we've reached out a little bit wider as well, but it's super rare and it's super needed. I mean, I'm well beyond their age, but I feel like I'm living through them and being like, yes, there are people like me who do this, and I do have a space in this industry. So it's a great platform. It's confidence, and it's that mindset that anything is possible, right? That and not that anything is possible, that you are possible.
There you go. Okay. Yeah, you just gotta listen to yourself. I know like that feeling, yeah.
I really love music, so it was really encouraging to work with someone who has experience, and it gave me an idea of how I want to be creative and like the process and going into producing and working with music.
The scope and aim of the project was sort of defined by a grant that we applied for in mid-2017, and the granting organization is an initiative that came out of the Obama White House called CATER, the Collaborative to Advance Equity Through Research. And so the mission of CATER really sort of fit what Professor Hisama and I had been talking about for a long time, inequities and barriers faced by women, by people of color, and particularly women of color when it comes to particular kinds of musical spaces, university spaces, and technologized spaces.
I feel like it's unique working with women, especially like if they look like you and they come from the same background as you. You can relate to other people because of their backgrounds and because of what they listen to.
It's really important, I think, early on, as early as possible, for children to see themselves represented. So it's really wonderful to have an opportunity where the students can come to Columbia University as high school students and actually sit face to face with one of the top-notch producers, engineers, and songwriters in the country, Ebony Smith, to be able to say, hey, wait a minute, she's doing this, I can do this.
I think it enriches our industry to have diversity along those lines, to have women in every facet of the business, not just in production engineering, but also in A&R and marketing, in development, business development, in legal. It's so important to ensure that the industry that I'm in reflects the world that I live in. So for me, it was very important to take part in the Daughters of Harlem project.
Everybody knows what Columbia is, so for them to open up their doors for us and to give us a chance that we don't really get outside of here is great, and it makes me feel really accepted and just comfortable. And I know the other women here can also agree.
So I'm really happy to welcome our panelists today. You heard them speak in the film, and I see we have a puppy, Sandra. Okay, great. So I am going to introduce all speakers right now, and then we'll have a set of questions. I wanted to preface this by saying everyone on the panel today is an alum of Columbia, so we work together on this project, but also sometimes when you are students here. Pianist and composer Courtney Bryan is the Albert and Linda Mintz Professor of Music at Newcomb College in the School of Liberal Arts, Tulane University, and a creative partner with the Louisiana Philharmonic Orchestra. She received a DMA from Columbia and has received numerous awards and fellowships, including the Herb Alpert Award in the Arts, the Samuel Barber Rome Prize in Music Composition, and the United States Artist Fellowship. Dr. Bryan's music is in conversation with various musical genres, including jazz and other types of experimental music, as well as traditional gospel, spiritual, and hymns. Kamari Carter is a producer, performer, and sound designer and installation artist, primarily working with sound and found objects. Driven by the probative nature of perception and the concept of conversation and social science, he seeks to expand narrative structures through sonic stillness. Carter's work has been exhibited at Automata Arts, MoMA, Lenfest Center for the Arts, and Issue Project Room, among others. Carter holds a BFA in Music Technology from California Institute of the Arts and an MFA in Sound Art from Columbia. Matthew D. Morrison is an assistant professor in the Clive Davis Institute of Recorded Music at New York University's Tisch School of the Arts and holds a PhD in the Historical Musicology program from Columbia. He's held fellowships at Harvard and the Library of Congress, and his publications have appeared in Journal of the American Musicological Society, Women and Performance, and the Oxford Handbook of Music and Philosophy. Dr. Morrison is currently completing a book entitled Black Sound, Making Race and Popular Music in the U.S., which considers the making of race, intellectual property law, and American popular entertainment out of blackface minstrelsy. Ebony Smith is an award-winning music producer, audio engineer, and singer-songwriter based in New York City. She's the founder and president of Gender Amplified, Inc., an organization that celebrates and supports women and girls in music production and audio engineering. Ebony has received 2 Grammy certificates and currently works as an engineer, producer, and studio coordinator for Atlantic Records. She holds a master's degree in music technology from NYU and a bachelor's degree in Africana Studies from Barnard College. During her years here, she trained at the CMC. Sandra E. Woodruff, II, spent 20 years in the music business as a recording artist, songwriter, and composer, and guitarist. She graduated from the School of General Studies at Columbia in 2019. She worked for the Daughters of Harlem, working in sound program twice, both the spring and the fall, 2018. And she's co-founder of Limelight Studios and producer of Engagement and Social Impact at the Kelly Strayhorn Theater in Pittsburgh. Welcome back, everyone, virtually. It's great to see you all. So the format for today will be that I will ask questions of the panelists, and you can jump in when one of the prompts speaks to you specifically. So we'll do a few rounds, and then we'll leave time for questions at the end. We were running a little bit late, but I think we can still end, and people can have enough time for lunch. We can end before noon if possible. Okay, so first question is, what drew you to participating in Daughters of Harlem and its mission to address the underrepresentation of women of color in electronic music production engineering and to bridge the campus with the community outside the university's gates? You are all alums of Barnard, Columbia, and might want to speak to your own experience.
Go ahead, Courtney, you want to start?
No, you go ahead.
Okay. It's good to see everyone. Thanks again for having me. Yes, if anyone knows about the School of General Studies, that non-traditional path going into academia, this program speaks to me. Like, it was me. I felt like I am them. Going back to school as a 36-year-old, being in the industry already and going back to get my undergrad, going on tour with the Backstreet Boys, so doing all these things, but still wanting to come back to this space and see what it was like to study music in this way. So when I met, when I had an opportunity to actually have a mentor, and Ellie became my mentor through a Columbia initiative, and you brought up this program, I was like, I don't know if there's if it's already going on, if I can join it, but I want to be able to help in any way that I can. And I believe the workshop facilitators were already picked out, but I definitely wanted to help. So this is when I first met Courtney and just kind of worked with her and kind of learned what was happening in that space, and added to you know, the knowledge that I picked up just from being in the industry, being in a pop artist in the 90s, but not actually being the person engineering, but watching what all those engineers do, and being able to 20 years later bring that back full circle and work with students and work with Black young women and women of color to be able to actually bring them into a space that, I don't know how many times I've walked past Columbia. I lived in New York City for 10 years, and I walked past Columbia probably for 6 years before I actually stepped on campus, not until I applied. So part of that video where someone was like, we all know what Columbia is, but you know, for Columbia to open its doors, a lot of folks don't know that the campus is open. You can just walk in and go onto the campus. Me as an adult, I did not know that. So reaching out into the community and doing it this way, it was a no-brainer for me to be a part of this program, because literally I became exposed to other parts of the department, even being a student there. Like, I didn't know Seth. I didn't know where CMC, the CMC was, really before Daughters of Harlem. So that was, you know, I might have been 36 and they were 17, but I was experiencing it the exact same way.
Yeah, that's very interesting what you said, Sandra, because I did kind of smile when the student said we all know what Columbia is, because I guess that would mean different things to different people, but I think we all know where she's coming from. And yeah, I guess, well, one reason I signed up, I mean, I feel like when Professor Hassama put something together, I say yes, so so that's part of it. But also, I do feel like the meaning of, like, the CMC is such a special place. And there's this very, you know, this very important history that comes out of, like, the Columbia-Princeton Electronic Music Center going back, and then thinking about the CMC, like what it represents now, and like the history of all the experiments and special things that have happened there. But too, well, I signed up, but what I experienced from being part of this was just the joy of all of these young women, or these girls, girls of color in high school, knowing that this place was for them. So just like the joy, like walking around the CMC and them just feeling at home there, that was very moving for me, because it's a space where you wouldn't normally see that. So as you know, in that kind of way. So I think it was just really meaningful that it was just a given that this was a place for them, and that this was a place of experimenting and experimenting in the ways that they would like to experiment, and being pushed by, you know, the amazing, like, faculty that was there, and like all this community that we all had together. It was just really special.
Great, thank you. Anyone else want to contribute? Matthew.
Hi, yes, thank you so much. Thank you for having us here and inviting us back to be a part of this larger celebration, Ellie, and also to talk about Daughters of Harlem, which I think is one of Columbia's really important projects here for a number of reasons. And so, like Courtney, as a former student of Ellie and a continued mentee / friend, I'm pretty much whatever Ellie says that I can do, I'm going to participate in because I owe much of my current sort of professional and personal self to Ellie's mentorship that I'm very grateful for. But just in terms of the fellowship, I mean, in terms of the workshop itself, it was also a no-brainer for me, sort of like you mentioned there, Sandra, because I began my larger career after undergraduate school teaching middle and high school students. It was my first job for 3 years. Once I began graduate school, I continued to teach middle and high school students in various programs. I directed a program for a few years at Princeton for Black and brown students who were just looking to work and develop their own critical relationship and skills as scholars and thinkers. And then also teaching in New York City's art programs throughout my graduate career. And so this particular event was something for me that was a really special opportunity to really bridge that gap, as we've already talked about here, between the way that Columbia sort of sits in Harlem and how it positions itself in relation to Harlem residents. And again, I think this is one of the few programs that really did sort of think about what it means to care for and take care of and provide resources for Black and brown girls in Harlem. And so it was a very important thing, I think, for me to be a part of, and also to sort of contribute to their critical relationship to the history and to the other ways that we think about music making today.
Fabulous, thank you. Any other comments about this question? Ebony.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. For me, Columbia and this particular program are so important because Barnard was where I discovered that I wanted to do music production. Before that point, I was unaware that it was an art form and certainly unaware that it was a career. And I spent quite a bit of my undergraduate time just colliding with the craft of music production and engineering. My campus job was as an audio technician on campus. So I started learning about the basics of signal flow and audio components, audio technologies, how to think about sound management and sound reinforcement. So all of that was converging at the same time. I was also learning about myself, also learning about intersectionality, women's studies, African-American studies, Africana studies. So it was just the perfect environment to develop a budding career, but also to establish a new mindset. And Columbia Computer Music Center was, it was great to just go to Prentice Hall and you just have this huge monstrosity of a building in the middle of Harlem that was sitting there in the middle of this location and geography that had such a past and such a history, but this building that also seemed quite a bit detached from that and having its own individual identity as this beacon of science, this environment where science had a space and where science and music were aligned in this powerful way. And it was just something very powerful about getting off at 125th Street and going to that building and what it did for me as a Barnard student and what it also did for me as a curious person and as a musical person. So to see that legacy being properly explored through this program, right? Bringing those legacies together, the legacy of Harlem, the legacy of Columbia, the legacy of music at Columbia, computer music at Columbia, is such a powerful movement in and of itself to explore through this program. So I definitely felt the need, especially as an industry person, but also as a Columbia alum, to align myself with it.
Great, thank you. Kamari.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to piggyback on what all the other panelists have said, which has been absolutely emphatic, but that my initial participation in Daughters of Harlem kind of came from the aspect that I felt like in my graduate studies, I didn't have any professors of color at the time, minus one of my mentors, Mia Masioka, and I wanted other people to have the opportunity to see people that looked a little bit like them, assisting them on something that they very much cared about. And I didn't want it in any way to feel as though this pillarized space was being gatekept from them and their creative possibility and their ingenuity. And a lot of the mentor sessions that we had that I can speak about later was more for them than it was for myself. I felt it's throughout the entire process that I was learning as I went, even though I was the mentor, because they were bringing so many things to the table and so many ideas, and they were just so just so creative in the way in which they thought about how they wanted to do something and recreate it, but based on something that they had already listened to. And as you kind of saw in the film, one of the things that I've opened up with was about sampling, and we kind of had a very long tree branch conversation about that. And they learned that some of the music that they'd been listening to, earlier that year was sampled from something from before their time. And it just became this thing that I felt like was important and necessary for them to see someone that looked a lot like them, talking to them in a way that felt amenable and in many ways like they didn't have to be anyone but themselves, because the program itself was made for people like themselves. So yeah, that was a lot of my initial participation, and I'm very grateful for having been able to do it.
Yeah, for me, it's been one of the most rewarding, happiest times I've had at Columbia working for the Daughters of Harlem, because I've taught here for over 15 years, and there's really a severe lack of diversity, to use that word, in my music theory classes. So Sandra, you were a music major, and it's like mostly white students, maybe a few Asian students. In 15 years, I had 2 Black students in all my music theory and 4 classes, 20th century music. Like, it was, to me, unacceptable. So I wanted to reach other students, which I do in my listening to hip hop class, which I'm teaching this semester. So it is a feature of music departments, conservatories, and schools of music that there is often unfortunate lack of diversity in the student population, which a lot of people are thinking about right now in the wake of Black Lives Matter movement and also the Me Too movement, I think. So I wanted to move to a second question, but also to just share with the audience this report for the Daughters of Harlem. So I'll just quickly screen share it. So this is our website. So you can do listening. I thought we could listen to one short piece later, an example from the workshop. So this is, you can download this. You can see the young women who were this was the first workshop in April 2018. So we list their names, and we also, here's the workshop leaders the first time around. We also quoted them. So one thing we wanted to do was get their perceptions, like, is this working for you? And there were just some really touching comments, like, what did you enjoy today? What did you learn? What will you remember about today? Everything. And I learned a lot about producing music on a MacBook computer. I will remember everything because it was a great experience. I loved getting to work with other great girls and professional artists. I love the great girls. And I enjoyed collaborating with my group and sharing ideas. I learned how to perform basic tasks on Logic Pro. And I wanted to emphasize that we went through a lot of questions about what sort of software, what should we do in terms of being able to keep their work. So we gave everyone a fabric tote bag with fabric markers, and they had fun decorating them, and they gave them the flash drive at the end. Also in the bag, we slipped in information about going to college, Columbia-Barnard. So we also shared information about Jerry Allen. And I think I'd love to do a follow-up. Where are these young women now? What are they doing now? Some wanted to go to med school. Some had ambitions outside music, but they wanted to keep up their music work. So I'll ask a second question, which is, please discuss your participation as a workshop leader at Daughters of Harlem. What was your experience working with these young women? And feel free to share any stories, because we are all about unsung stories here.
Yeah, I guess I could share one thing I think that really stuck with me after, that I really remember the most, is just the whole focus on collaboration. And so the way that everything was designed, the whole idea that the girls would work in groups together, but that they also would work with each of the instructors throughout the day, just was really fascinating to me as a way of learning. Like, it could have been like this one-on-one, or maybe this group worked with this person, but just the fact that there was this rotating thing and that everything was decided in groups. And I really enjoyed seeing how different each of the groups were, because some of them were like, okay, we're all collaborating, and they just kind of felt free to kind of add different things. And then in some groups, maybe there was one person who was more of like a leader, and like they had different ways of working together, but just kind of help. I remember just kind of helping to try to balance that out and like make sure that people were expressing their ideas. But for the most part, they just came ready to create. Like that's the thing I remember. Like everybody came like, and they were so talented. People came with melodies, or maybe they came with like if they played an instrument, or if they had prior knowledge of computer program in some way or another. And for those who didn't, they still were just very open and they were learning. So I guess the main thing I remember was the collaborative nature of the whole thing, and how they created this work in one day that they were very proud of. And of course, we were very proud of them. And I'll say for me, it was an inspiration in the kind of work that I like to do when I work with young people. So having this experience with for Daughters of Harlem has really influenced the way I work when I do a project, say like with an orchestra, and I have a chance to work with young people outside of that. I started a program called Sounds of Your Neighborhood. So I have young people work, and the same thing where they're doing it as a group. So I have them work and create music, learn how to improvise, how to compose, using whatever they have, like if it's their voice and their desk or something, or if they have instruments. But a lot of what I experienced in that one day was an inspiration to me in how to put together programs for young people to get them creating music together. So those are some of the things I got out of it.
Great, thanks. Does anyone want to add to that?
For me, it was really great because, you know, my world now is industry, you know, being in the studio all the time. So it was great to get back uptown and do something I do so passionately now in an academic environment. And also, one of the artists in the group, she and I connected at the event and kept in touch. And so I would have her come and work on records with me at Atlantic. I thought she was very, very good writer and also a great demo artist. And so we still, to this day, collaborate on various projects. I have records coming up, and she's always been in the back of my mind as somebody who, you know, when the time is right, or, you know, depending on what she wants to do, I could actually maybe sign at some point, you know. So I do think that this element of connecting these young girls with the larger industry is such a critical component, because that's a lot of times the missing piece. It's not a matter of talent. There does need to be some sort of pipeline as far as engaging the industry so that these young ladies can professionalize themselves, and also have an avenue to do that through an all-woman or woman-centric community, because so often women are growing in the business or getting connected to the business through groups of men who have specific interests as it pertains to uplifting women, right? So this is a much different entryway and a much more legitimate one, I think, for them.
Thank you, Ebony. That is so fabulous about continuing to work with one of the students. It's really great. Matthew.
It really is. So when I was preparing for the workshop, I was a bit nervous. Because, you know, high school students don't have the filters that we develop as adults, as we often know, especially New York City, tri-state students. So I was nervous, like, oh my goodness, they've already done this hands-on, like very interesting, engaging work with Courtney and with Sandra, with Kamari. And so I'm supposed to come here and like talk to them, like, wait, what? You know, but of course, this is also sort of what I do in a way, try to make sure to present information that's both palatable, but also thick and critical, so the students can be and feel engaged and also empowered by history and by knowledge. And so when I was there, it was really encouraging, because I didn't have, like when I walked in, those are all my own insecurities, because they were ready. They were ready for the conversations. They were ready for the activities. They were ready to really sort of think about how they place themselves as artists, as women, as people of color, as Black, as brown folks within this larger industry and history, that they also think about themselves as creative artists. So it was really encouraging to see how they really didn't separate sort of who they were as artists from who they were as people and who they were as thinkers and who they were as like critical agents and activists and such. So that was very encouraging. But then also prior to, I was like, when I spoke with, when Ellie made the invitation, I was like, listen, Ebony Smith, because I mean, I'm very happy to be a part of a group and a workshop that is geared specifically towards women, but being that I am not a woman and not wanting to take up all of the space, it was really nice to be able to have a conversation with Ebony, someone who has done production on everything from Hamilton to Alanis Morissette, like all of these just really top-notch, as I said in the video, one of the top-notch producers, engineers out there, period. But it was also Ebony's commitment through her organization, Gender Amplified, where I was like, this is a perfect sort of connection between how students can imagine themselves as cultural workers as well as artists at the same time, who are contributing to their own growth as professionals while they're also engaged in community work with others. And so that was, it was really special for me in that way.
Yeah, Matthew, I remember, sorry, I'll get to you in a second, Sandra, that you exhorted the students to find your inner musicologist, which I found so touching. So I wanted to emphasize it's not just a hands-on learning the tools, the tips and tricks of the trade, but it's also thinking about music, how it has a part in everyone's life and how you can shape that music and your world and yourself through music, which is part of the Tia Denora book, Music in Everyday Life. So we wanted it both to be a seminar, the research-based discussions, which we started the day with, and students wrote on note cards, you saw one in the video, about their experience with music, what it meant to them. And I've done this project in my teaching where I ask students to write what's called an audio biography, like write your life through sound. What's the first sound you remember, like at a very early age? Or maybe your mother tells you she sang this to you when you were not born yet. But what does music really mean to you from zero to your present moment? And then how can you engage with music in so many ways as a creator, thinker, maker, listener? Go ahead, Sandra.
As a workshop leader in October, what was really interesting was that being a just tech support with Courtney and the April workshop, and having the students come in, as everyone has said, they came in with ideas they already had, poems, melodies, some sort of reference or just some desire to play or do something. Like I want to be here. Like it was a very intentional moment for all of these students who wanted to be there. So witnessing that as someone who kind of grew up where like being able to say what I want wasn't a thing. And so to sit back and to see how I'm just here to support them, not teach them, but support them, was changed me and how I approach just working with young people. Again, I'm 40. They were, they're much younger. And then being the workshop leader in October, and the first group who came in, I brought in all my guitars because that's my main thing. I play guitar, I play bass, brought them all in. And there's just one student, she played everything. Reminded me of me. I tried to play everything when I was a kid, trumpet, French horn, the whole gamut. I still just have 13 guitars. That's what I work with. But they were so encouraging to each other. I think a couple of the girls knew each other, but most of them were brand new. There was one student who, she did not play anything, but she wanted to learn something. So one of the other students sat with her and showed her a little piano tune. Another student wanted to be able to harmonize, but she couldn't figure out how to separate the two. So we sat down together. That's one of the moments in the video where you see everyone's clapping because she was able to have that instant wow moment for her. So like all of those instant wow moments and just watching the joy on their faces that they've accomplished something in that space was one of the best experiences for me as a workshop leader, just to sit back and say, how can I support you? What is there that maybe I've learned that you're telling me that you want, or just teach me, what you're doing. So I think that was one of the most rewarding moments for me that kept happening in literally every single group. And then the things that they learned, you know, coming from like Kamari's group as well, things that I don't do and that they're bringing in, and I'm like, oh, this is amazing. So I think that as a workshop leader with the students, I learned so much about just listening and being supportive to their ideas so that they have ownership of their ideas, and we're just there to take it, you know, to the next level. So that was a you know, very amazing experience for me.
Yeah, that's Sandra, thank you for that, because it's really a radical approach to pedagogy to think that you are not the expert, you don't know it all, you may know a ton, but we can learn from students as well, like help them shape the experience because they have interests and hopes and fears and all sorts of things. And I just wanted to explain how the program worked, and then Kamari will speak, which was that we didn't have any bars to this program. There was just basically one page they had to fill in, and you didn't have to play the violin from age 6. You didn't have to have studied composition with a teacher. We just took everyone basically who applied, who had an interest, because the situation of music education in the New York City public schools is not good. So there's specialized schools, amazing schools like LaGuardia. Many famous musicians, artists have gone through that, dancers. However, if you look at the stats on the New York City public school websites, there's one for each school. I was shocked to see the students don't go here to hear any music, and they don't have music brought to the school. They don't have a resource room. They don't have instruments. They don't have anything. So we didn't want to make it that you have to have something before you can do this program at Columbia. We also had real trouble getting students, I would say both times. And Lucia Wagnerova, whom you heard in the video, did so much work to get students. So she would go to a public school. They wouldn't let her in the door, like with the flyers. They wouldn't let her in. She would email, no replies, because the teachers are overwhelmed, the principals, etc. So what we eventually did, and I want to shout out to Jenny Navasky of Humanities Prep in Chelsea. She is a co-parent or a parent at the school my children go to, a social worker. So I just in desperation wrote to this parents list and said, we need students. And she said, I have students. So she sent us a number of students who came back for the second round, and you heard some of them speak as well. So Kamari, and then I'd like to play a sample of some of the music they made.
Yeah, I just had a small addendum to what Matthew and Sandra said, by the nature of, you know, high schoolers don't really have the same filter. And when the aha and like wow moments were there, they were very there. But I very vividly remember that if you did anything to the track that they were working on that they did not like, it was a bunch of like looking at each other and being like, no, we're gonna go back. We're gonna do something else, because they were so probative in how to do what they wanted to do, but they were also very decisive on what they wanted to have when they left. They knew the kind of sound that they wanted to go into. As Sandra had mentioned, they had melodies, they had harmonies and stuff like that. So I remember that there was one, I believe it was the second group, and there was a vocal line that could use a lot of space to open up. And they were very keen to that idea. So we're opening filters, and I'm showing them, echoes and reverbs and this, that, and the other. And we're turning the dial, and they're like, yeah, everything's great. And then I turned it just a little bit too much, and they were like, no, go back. They were just so succinct in what they wanted because they already knew going into it. And as Sandra said, we were kind of just there to assist them. So I just wanted to kind of share that tidbit because it always is something that I think about as a mentor.
I love that. So part of a mentor's role, I think, is to let people become the person they want to be. So I was so excited when Sandra contacted me, or I got your name along with a few others who read in my profile about this program. So that specifically, connected us. And I was so grateful to David Madigan, who's no longer at Columbia, for starting this program. So we had coffee, or was it breakfast, Sandra? One of the two? Yeah. We ate, we sipped coffee, and we talked. So I'm going to play the sample from the website, the Daughters of Harlem website, and we'll continue the conversation after this. So on the website, you can see there's a listen tab. So at the listen tab, there are samples from both October, and you can see it's Kamari, Seth, Rachel, who's at Berkeley, NEC. She's in Boston, and Sandra. So we'll listen to the first one, and then lower down is from the spring workshop with David, Courtney, Zasha, and Mia. So this is about 2 minutes long. And the poem that they're reading is original. They wrote it, and they also asked us if they could use Spanish, and we were shocked to even hear this question, is of course, and they said they're not allowed to speak Spanish at their school, which is a public high school here in the city.
What? Seriously? How?
Seriously, how? I don't know. So, yeah, so this is called Heartbeat.
Your broken English has been made out to be funny. Crossing oceans for a better life, lost in translation. See, I recognize how hard it must be for you to be. Life hasn't been easy for you, this country hasn't made it better. You stand on the stained concrete of your ancestors' blood. The bones shackled and torn, the heart sworn to be uplifted, emotionally left naked. Like the day one was born, you're left with nothing. Dear mommy, dear papi, dear tia, dear tío, abuela and abuelo, we're sorry. For so long, just like masters covered the mouths of the slaves, we too have been silenced by this country's history. Our history. You carry the mistakes of our colonizers on your back and make them your own. That changes now. Our voices will be heard, stigmas will be broken, truth will be spoken. Dear mommy, dear papi, tia, tío, dear abuelo, dear abuela, you are worthy.
Perdón, mi presidente, no te quiero confundir, solamente es vida que quiero vivir. Perdón, mami, tú sabes que toda mi vida es la vida que tú no has podido vivir. Land of the free, home of the immigrants, freedom in the home but not in the streets. El barrio es mi casa, quiero ver más, pero presidente, tus paredes me paran de explorar.
Dear mommy, dear papi, tia, tío, dear abuelo, dear abuela, you are worthy.
So returning to the panelists, any recollections you'd like to share about anything of the day or 2 days you were at Daughters of Harlem workshop, working with the students at the CMC, listening to and responding to their work, interacting with them during the day, like we had snacks, we had lunch, we had the reception with their family, participating in the public performance of their works and discussion, meeting their family, friends, and social worker teachers who also came to the performance. Any memories?
I remember vividly coming to the talk with their parents. I was not in any workshops, but I had an opportunity to listen to the music and also do a Q&A with the students and their parents. And it was really great to see the outpouring of support that they had from home. And actually, I was able to follow up with, like I mentioned before, one of the students and her mother. And it was just great to get a sense of the full lineage, the musical heritage that, you know, this one student had. Her mother was a singer, the aunt sang. So much of her desires for a career in music stemmed from her upbringing in church, and she had such a deep faith-based understanding of what her musical goals were. And I had an opportunity to talk to some of the other students and with their parents, and I really got a sense of the communal aspect of what Daughters of Harlem was able to accomplish Even though I wasn't able to see the actual workshops themselves, I think that this particular event was an extension of that much larger ecosystem, that much larger community, and how the workshops and the initiative doesn't just touch the students, it actually manages to touch the larger environments that these young people are from and their parents as well.
Yeah, thank you. I remember one comment from a student, and Matthew, your point about their like high school versus college students. So we asked them to fill out little sheets at the end to comment on the project so we could make it better the next time. And one person said, "My mom made me come here. I thought it would be really bad, but I'm here and it was so great." So it's like I was forced to come here, but now I see that it was really worth it. And then for the fall, one of the students brought her sister. Like it was just, she didn't register. She's like, "Come to this event." So yeah, we have hopes about bringing it back. We've been in the pandemic, so it's been difficult. I know some people are managing to teach still versus Zoom, but there's been a pause. Matthew.
I was going to say I was very struck by how I think you mentioned, Ellie, that some of them came from communities that they were already connected before. I was struck by how present a lot of the students were just around social issues, around history. They were very aware. I mean, I don't know if they were doing critical race studies already, but the kind of analysis that they had, as we heard in that particular track, was very sophisticated. And again, these are, young ladies throughout from Harlem and New York City area who are part of public school. And I think there's often this assumption or this idea that students are just difficult or they don't know anything. And so it was a really good sort of reminder that there are so many, like if you give students the opportunity and the access, what they have the ability to do is great. And I think, as you mentioned, Ellie, it's really important to note that there is no music in the public schools at a big level, at a structural level anymore. And think about what it means to be in school all day long, whether virtually or whether in person, and not having gym, not having music, not having anything but the various particular core subjects and tests being the baseline of everything that you do. It was quite amazing to me to see how prepared they were for this type of like really, again, sophisticated engagement, both with music as well as with the sort of topics and issues that they face in their daily lives. And I think it's also a really critical component of this particular workshop that, working in the Clive Davis Institute of Recorded Music, one thing that I noticed in the applications is that students who apply have been using Pro Tools and have been using these at Ableton since they were like in middle school. This stuff also costs money, right? So it's also about access quite often. And so to give them the space to both the equipment and the technology that they can play with and learn from and build their skill set on, while also sort of allowing them to understand that, hey, only thing I'm missing is a beat pad, but then let me figure out how to get this beat pad because then I can do this and that. So just giving them the access and the ability to sort of open up what they already have in them, I think is a really important component of this workshop as well.
Thank you. So I have one more question for the panel, and then we'll open it up to questions, and I see them coming in, and feel free to type more into the Q&A. So my question for you is, what impact do programs such as Daughters of Harlem have on students' learning, experiences, careers, and lives? If you know, I know some of you, like Courtney mentioned her work as a composer in residence in Florida. And so it doesn't have to be Daughters of Harlem specifically, but if you have any thoughts on that, because I was told by one of the people who worked at a public high school, she's never seen a program like this. She's never seen it. And she was so excited, and she got her students here, and like reminders, Saturday morning, you're supposed to be at Columbia-CMC. But any thoughts?
I just wanted to mention that I think the impact, or the biggest impact that I felt like it had, and that my allied participation made point of, was possibility. I felt like when I was talking to the students, they felt like, oh, now that we've done this thing, and now that we have this space and this access, this is something we can do. And it seemed like before something like Daughters of Harlem, in this very colloquial, almost, demonym of, female-centric production, that it was unheard of for them, and that they had never seen or felt as though there was this possibility to feel comfortable in a space of a studio with other women that looked exactly like them, assisting them in something that they were able to do. And so I felt like that was kind of the apotheosis for them, is that we have this possibility to do this thing because we've been given access to this space and these people. So now from here on, I can go and do other things that I've been interested in that previously didn't even seem like they were on my scope because of how I look and where I grew up and my demographic. So I felt like that personally was the biggest impact that Daughters of Harlem made, is that it gave them, in addition to access and space, it just kind of opened up that world of possibility so that they can keep in touch with people like Ebony and make these tracks and use poetry that is in the language that they want to use, because in other spaces they're not able to do that. So that was just the tidbit that I wanted to mention.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Sandra and then Courtney, go ahead.
For any program like Daughters of Harlem, I think the impact is great, but I think the one of the most important things that I'm thinking about now, and we've even kind of discussed, like, where are they now? What's happening? Is like the momentum, that pendulum. There are a lot of social programs that are out there that we run people through, but then how do we continue to work with them? And when we think about what equity looks like, maybe some of the other programs don't necessarily need continued support, but with something like, Daughters of Harlem or any other program, that impact is so great. But then where do they go? They go back into wherever they are. How do we continue that support? It's definitely amazing that Ebony was able to connect, and that, number one, that she was there, and that all of a sudden that 6 degrees of separation from the industry to them was closed very instantly. So that impact was huge. But how do we create something that we also continue that momentum with working with these students, so that now they're like, okay, I did this great thing, but now what? Where do I go? And sometimes they may still need that push. So the impact is great. And then I just want to think about the momentum. How do we keep that pendulum going and keep them engaged and until it hooks to wherever they want to be, whether it is music or going into the medical field. But that sort of idea of possibility and continued possibility and visibility, I think is great. And it's just something that, like, as the co-founder of Limelight, we created a program called Scale that works with Black women in music in Pittsburgh. And there are a lot of amazing musicians, Black women here. Pittsburgh is actually the worst city in the country for Black women to live on every statistic. So whether or not we chose to create a fellowship or a residency for women in music or for women in nursing or whatever that may be, there are still all of these other things that we have to address within this program that are unlike other ones when we're working with Black women. We're talking about mental health. We're talking about, being paid what you're supposed to be paid. We're talking about all of these things that bring now, how do we make this program equitable? It's not just providing music resources. There's all these other things that, like, are they getting there? Are they able to get here? So I think that making those impacts even bigger is kind of what I think the start of Daughters of Harlem is really doing, bringing them onto campus and making that this is a space for you. You can walk on anytime you want,
Wow. Well, I was gonna say stuff, but I just want to say that's so important what you said, Sandra. Just, there is the thing about sometimes you have these moments in like a very important part of your life where it does open a possibility. Like sometimes it is a matter of like you get exposed to things, to people that really just change your perception, and that does its own work. But like you're saying, it also is kind of like how, like, a program like this is so special for a number of reasons. I mean, it's multi-generational. So we have these different generations of people coming together and working in this very kind of open-ended, communal way. And then there's, of course, the Columbia connection, so that most of us who are teaching, who are in the program, are either students of Columbia, graduates, or professors at Columbia. And so there's that. So there's a certain investment with it. But yeah, I guess how does it continue? Something minor I was going to say that I thought, well, not minor. Something I liked about the way it was designed, is not minor, is that I love that it was like all this open-ended time of workshopping, and that it ended with a performance that had official recordings. So I think that's something where, even if it is like a one-day event that happens every now and then, the fact that there was like a culmination where there was an audience, where it was seen as something that was fun, but it was also very serious. It's like, now we're going to present this, and then there's a recording to take with that. So sometimes that one recording you have of your work can be its own, like, opening up to a lot of other possibilities. So I think that just the structure of that. And one good memory I just want to share was, I remember walking down the street from Princess to the building where they performed on the main campus. And I remember that they just, like, they were creating all day, but they've gotten to singing songs they knew together. Like, they were singing something by SZA and something by Rihanna. And, like, throughout that, like, walk, it was like them harmonizing together on their shared, like, music that they loved. And that moment, I guess, really stuck out to me for some reason or another. It was just kind of like we're having all these experiences, but it just reminded me how I related to, like, say, like, Mariah Carey or Whitney Houston growing up. And just to have that kind of thing where you just kind of, like, just the bonding that they had, it seemed like they had known each other forever by that point. So yeah, just everything, the way it was structured, between the social time, between, like, the workshopping, but then to have, like, this performance with official recording was just, like, all of that together, I thought was really meaningful.
Thank you. Unless anyone has more to say right now, I thought we'd open it up to the Q&A for maybe 7 to 10 minutes. So there are a few questions. One connects to what Sandra just said. So this is Lainey Pfefferman. The question is, or comment, question and comment. I love this project so much. How can I help? What do you need the most? So that is a great question, Lainey, and I wanted to just send this to everyone. So Lucia and I co-wrote an article on this very project, which is going to be published in a book this year. So we talk about the process from start to finish, like finding funding, working together, what this project means historically, and have some of the outcomes. So that's one thing in terms of if you're thinking about your own institution, how you might maybe want to start something similar. With regard to Columbia and the CMC specifically, so we had it in 2017, 18 and 18, 19, 20 I was on leave, and 20 to 21, you know what this year has been. So I have been contacted by various people who've heard about the project and are offering funding. Like, they're very excited about it and want to do something which is going to do something for the community. And some people have the perception that there's a lot of money at Columbia and Barnard. There is, but it doesn't instantly go to music and the arts. So you don't just have these pots of cash, you have to be a go-getter and apply for funding, etc. So I think there's a lot of interest in these sorts of programs. With regard to its future at Columbia, I am leaving Columbia, as I think some of you know, this summer. So I hope this project will continue. Zasha, I know, is deeply committed to it. Seth, Brad, Mia, faculty who are continuing next year. There's just such rich possibilities. And then there's also a question from Joyce Solomon Mormon in the chat, which was about how often it met. We only met one Saturday in the spring and 2 successive Saturdays in the fall. So we just had 3 days of meetings. There was so much work that went into those, like 1 day and 2 day sessions, and money as well. So we paid for everyone's food, the flash drives, the people who worked who weren't Columbia affiliated, etc. It's not hugely expensive, but there is a commitment of funding. So then on some of the responses, I read, we want this every week. And it's like, I'd love to do it every week, but then I have this job teaching, publishing articles and that sort of thing. But I was thinking, and this hasn't come to be yet, a summer program would be excellent, like a 6-week summer program. So they could come every day. And this age group is very difficult to place in the summer, as you might know. There's often summer camps for small children, middle school, but once you get to high school, what do? Like you can pull weeds in Central Park. So if there is funding, interest, and energy, it would be fantastic if it were expanded to be something bigger and something continuous, and maybe even integral to the Department of Music and CMC. So someone's teaching load could be running the workshop. There could be a course to train students to do these sorts of workshops when they get out in the world and go somewhere else. So there are so many possibilities I can think of, and I'm happy to talk with others if you'd like. So let's see, other questions. Ashley, Ashley Greer has a question I see with Ebony's name in it, so I'll read this. And so the question is, I'll just also try to paste it in here. Thank you, Ebony, for continuing to bring Black and brown women into the music industry through this program. Having worked at major labels myself on the licensing and creative services side, serendipitously seeing Sandra during her internship there, I definitely see both a void and opportunity. Thinking about Black and brown futures in music at Columbia, how are you hoping to create greater accessibility to Black and brown women in your classrooms at the undergraduate and graduate levels in the CMC, sound arts, and composition programs? Do you view Daughters of Harlem as a catalyst for this work? So I think it could be Ebony, but also other people could talk about this.
Well, first of all, thank you for that comment. It's definitely a part of my personal mission statement as a woman, but also as a woman of color. It in some ways feels like fighting against the current. Even today, you'd be surprised with all of the language and movements around equity and moving women and Black people, brown people into more positions of influence at esteemed organizations and institutions, especially in media and entertainment at large. You think that it would be easier right now. I think there's a very important moment that we're seeing from a public and facing perspective, but the reality is that the strongholds behind the scenes are still very much so intact. There's still a lot of issues that the business has with respect to valuing Black and brown women, but women in general. So one of the things that I'm personally doing as it pertains to Columbia-Barnard is I recently set up a scholarship fund, the Gender Amplified Scholarship Fund at Barnard, in collaboration with NASDAQ, the financial institution. It's a $3,000 scholarship fund that is geared towards identifying promising students and helping them find their way down a course of study around music production, audio engineering, with a focus obviously on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And there's also a complement internship program that we've also established in collaboration with NASDAQ, which allows for 1 or 2 Barnard students to go work at the marketplace where in the broadcast center where they do audio and post-production there. So I'm looking to create more initiatives along this line. And as far as the Daughters of Harlem, Elliot, would be great, and the other folks that are involved with this particular program, it would be great to identify students who could be great candidates for this scholarship through the Daughters of Harlem vetting system, for the lack of a better terminology. But I do think it takes, to your point, Ashley, I do think it takes a larger industry push to really systematically create change. And I don't know that it's going to happen overnight. I think we're in this for the long haul. It definitely takes an industry initiative, but it also takes individual efforts. And I like to think that in collaboration with Gender Amplified and Barnard and NASDAQ, that this small effort right now is $3,000, and we hope to grow it and hope to publicize it and popularize it in a way that shows to the student body that this is a path for them to go down. And it only takes one here and one there to spark a movement. I think I'm an example of that, right? I think I was the only student at Barnard that I knew of who was making music and making beats. And I built my senior thesis around production, and it was called Gender Amplified. And now Gender Amplified is affecting so many lives. So it only takes one person at a time, working passionately and diligently. And so I hope we'll see some changes. And there have been a lot of positive changes, but there's still a lot of work to do.
Thanks. Matthew, you want to speak?
I was just going to add that I think it also takes institutional investment and support, and not just having a small core of people like Ellie and like Zasha and like Lucia who are overcommitted to doing this type of work. And it sometimes takes the place of some of the things that could be done structurally within an institution. But in order for this to like really be sustainable, there has to be like an institutional investment of providing both administrative assistance, fundraising, and different things to bring in money, as well as sort of program directing. And so again, as Ellie mentioned, Ellie has been, area head, has multiple students, is teaching many classes, is doing work inside of the academy, doing work outside. Like there's just so many things happening, while also literally curating this with her colleagues and other participants, but for this to like really be sustainable. And Columbia needs these type of sustainable models because it has a responsibility, in the same way that my own institution downtown at NYU has a responsibility to really speak to, but particularly in Harlem, to not just give lip service to say, oh, we care, Black Lives Matter, or we have this thing here. As Sandra mentioned, many people don't even know that the campus is open because there is a clear division. And also it's clearly not open, right, to those who don't know that it's open. Okay, we're talking about campus policing, we're talking about all kinds of things. And so for this to like really be a sustainable model that is not just based on the labor of mostly women, right, doing this work on behalf of young girls, there needs to be an investment, not just from the CMC, but like an institutional investment from Columbia to say, hey, this is a sustainable thing that we want to see continue.
Yes, here. So I wanted to address a few questions that came into the panelist chat. So Bob Gluck is asking about whether there was institutional resistance to this project. And I would say there wasn't institutional resistance, but there was a lot of support from specific sites and people at Columbia. So I wanted to thank the Center for Science and Society, which is headed by Pamela Smith, a historian. They have funded the podcast series for this event. They funded for the Daughters of Harlem, I believe, and also the Society of Fellows Heyman Center for the Humanities. Eileen Gillooly has done so much. Thank you, Eileen, and her team, funding this and maybe 5 other things that I've done at Columbia. So there are people who care. There are people who are channeling funds to these sorts of projects. But at the larger level, in terms of upper administration, I have not heard from one administrator about this project. So I would say there's a lot of caring and commitment, but then, as Matthew pointed out, it needs to be institutional. It shouldn't be on the backs of very tired, fatigued faculty who decide to take this on top of their regular workload. So I would have loved a course release, or just here is $5,000 so I don't have to go hand in hand and stay up till midnight applying for funding over and over and over again. So it should be built into the system, to me. Okay, just checking the questions. So there's a question from Catherine Adamczyk. Is it possible to get a copy of the poem Heartbeat? Yeah, that poem, I was sure that they were reading something, because I didn't think a teenager could write a poem like that, but maybe I had assumptions that needed to be checked. So that poem and the Spanish reading, and again, this was 2018, so they were grappling with the question of this crisis of immigration and the new administration and just all the really tragic things that were happening. So we don't have a copy ourselves. I guess it is in the video audio, but we could try to find the author of that. I would love to have more contact with the alums of this program, and maybe they can have a space where they're updating us as to what they're doing, because we have a speaker or a workshop leader page, and this could continue and expand and have a footing. Sandra.
I'm pretty sure she wrote that poem, the student there. That was like my first encounter, and she came in with her notebook and
yeah, she did,
about her abuela and such. Yeah.
Amazing. So we're almost at the lunch hour. I'm just seeing if there are any, oops, I see all these messages that I probably should read. Let's see. Does any panelist see something that we need to discuss? I guess, Seth, you had written a comment. Do you want to just voice it if you can speak?
Yeah, sure. The second, the workshop that I participated in was the second of the two, and one of the young women said that they were talking about how things had gone in the last year, and she said, well, we live in the Bronx now because our landlord raised the rent in Harlem. And in the intervening 2 years since even that workshop, Harlem has gentrified almost unrecognizably in certain parts, and I think that contrasted with the Manhattanville campus, shiny Renzo piano buildings, and Prentice now is the only sort of reference to the older neighborhood, us and a car mechanic, and so I wonder, my question was, what can we do with a project like this to try to retain a sense of sort of actual community from communities that are actually forced into a diaspora away from Harlem, in a way that's counterproductive to the construction of a neighborhood, of a sense of identity to place, right?
Yeah, thank you. And Bob Gluck mentions the gym building protest. So if you aren't aware, there was a atrocious situation in which Columbia was building a gym in Morningside Park, and the community protested, and the bulldozers were there. They were breaking ground, and activists climbed into the mouth of the bulldozer, and it was a activist partnership between some people at Columbia, students, and the community, and they called it Jim Crow, GYM, because they said, well, if you're not at Columbia, you can come through the back door. So this was a really bad idea, and Lucia and I write about it in the essay, but for us it was part of being in the space. You saw the beautiful glass walls, and it's just a very pricey, price tag architectural space, and we thought, if this building is here, we want to use it, we want a piece of it. It shouldn't just be for the same audiences and actors. And if you look at pictures from the old CPEMC, there was a lot of dominance by people like Milton Babbitt, and there wasn't the diversity you saw in the Daughters of Harlem project. Okay, we should close so everyone can get lunch. So I just wanted to say, before I thank all our panelists, the next session starts at 1 o'clock. It's called New Histories and Futures for the CMC and Beyond. Brad Garton, about whom you've heard a lot so far, will be moderating, and it is with Mara Helmuth, whom we heard yesterday moderating, Mia Masaoka, who was involved in the first version of Daughters of Harlem, Katarina Rosenberger, alum. Sandra herself is coming back, and Nina Young, who was one of the 4 Guggenheim winners. We have just a abundance of riches today. So I wanted to thank Courtney, Sandra, Matthew, Kamari, Ebony for not only being here, but for being part of Daughters of Harlem. I think it has had a significant impact, and hopefully it will grow and shoot out roots and help spring up other workshops. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Ellie.